Chapter 976. Old Can, what are you waiting for? You won't be able to keep the child if you keep dragging this on. Pei Chi sounded anxious. Why was he still hesitating at a time like this? No matter how important Su Mo was she more important than the child? Did he not want Pei Huan anymore? Did he not want children anymore? At this moment, Pei Chi's heart ached for Pei Huan. Old Can's eyes were bloodshot. It wasn't that he didn't care about Pei Huan, but Su Mo was being treated like that by a few men. He was a man, and he couldn't ignore her. In the end, he gritted his teeth. Chi, take Pei Huan to the hospital. Pei Huan closed her eyes and said nothing. Old Can, are you crazy? Pei Chi's eyes were also filled with tears. Old Can pursed his lips. Please. He quickly walked out and didn't dare to look at Pei Huan. He was afraid to see the disappointment in her eyes and the despair she had for him. I'm sorry. In the future, I will spend the rest of my life taking care of you, and our child. Pei Chi and Lil Mei didn't delay any longer and helped him into Lil Mei's car. Pei Huan sat in the car. Her wedding dress was stained with blood, and it was also stained all over the car. Xiao Mei had been a manager for a long time, and she was used to the disputes and grudges in the industry. She was already numb to it. At this moment, her eyes were a little hot, and she felt bad for Pei Huan. Everyone knew that this might be Pei Huan's last chance to be a mother. As Xiao Mei drove, Pei Chi hugged Pei Huan and comforted her. It's fine. Pei Huan, think about the child. Nothing will happen. Pei Huan closed her eyes in pain. At this moment, the pain in her body was nothing compared to the pain in her heart. It wasn't that she couldn't understand why he wanted to save Su Mo, but her life and the child's life weren't as important as Su Mo's. Pei Huan kept her eyes closed and tears flowed down her cheeks. She held on to Pei Chi's arm tightly, almost digging into her flesh. After a moment of pain, Pei Huan screamed, "Sister!" Pei Chi burst into tears. Pei Huan had never properly called her big sister before. How painful was her heart at this moment. She hugged Pei Huan tightly and kept telling her that it would be fine. She called Tang Yu and asked him to bring Dr. Mei to see City General Hospital because it was the nearest hospital. Covered in blood, Pei Huan was sent to the emergency room. She looked at Pei Chi listlessly, unwilling to let go. His lips were unbelievably pale, and his voice was intermittent. Sister, until now, I can't bear to part with this child. I don't want to abort it. Pei Huan didn't say that she would take care of the child herself. Pei Chi had grown up with her, so how could she not understand her feelings at this time? Pei Huan smiled and held back her to cry. Pei to say. Pei to for Chi, Pei to saying, Huan to Chi, Pei was to saying, you, I, you, to you. Chi, you. Have to say. Chi, you, me, I, you. Chi, you. I, you. I, from now on, I only have you. Pei Chi stood in the aisle while Tang Yu stood on the other side. He slowly walked towards her. Pei Chi hugged his waist and said in a hoarse voice, Tang Yu, if you have to choose between me and the child one day, please choose the child. Oh. Chapter 977. Tang Yu patted her head and comforted her. Don't worry about Dr. Mei's medical skills. She nodded in his arms and then shook her head vigorously. At this moment, her phone rang. It was a voice changer from an unknown number. Pei Chi, you must be in a lot of pain right now, right? I heard that Pei Huan had a miscarriage and was hospitalized. That's a pity. Do you know where Kan Mingzhu went? Pei Chi gritted her teeth. She knew that it was Shen Lian. The voice on the other side of the phone continued, didn't Pei Huan say that my man is disgusting? Then, I'll find someone even more disgusting to rape Su Mo. Look, Pei Huan's man is heartbroken. He's going to save Su Mo even if he doesn't want her. Speaking of which, I've long disliked Su Mo. I'm really happy now. Especially when I see you in pain and crying, I'm even happier. A creepy laughter came from the other side of the phone. Then, the laughter stopped abruptly. Pei Chi gritted her teeth. It was Shen Lian. She was going to make her pay back double. She waited for a long time, but Lao Kan didn't show up because he was comforting Su Mo. Pei Chi didn't know Su Mo well, but she knew that women like Su Mo had their ways after being around for a long time. At this moment, her reputation might be ruined, and Lao Kan was her last hope. Whether it was in reality or in love, Lao Kan was the best home for her. But that wasn't what Pei Chi was worried about, because Pei Huan wouldn't want Lao Kan anymore. However, she didn't expect that Lao Kan would only show up at the hospital the next day. In between, he only called to ask about Pei Huan and the child. In Pei Chi's heart, it was probably because the white moonlight in his heart was more important. Pei Huan should give up now. 2 hours later, Dr. May came out first. She let out a long sigh and said, "That was close. The child is fine, but she has to take good care of the baby. Otherwise, she won't be able to keep the child." Pei Chi breathed a sigh of relief. Tang Yu reached out to hold her and asked for her, "How long will it take to see him?" "Half an hour will be enough. Just don't provoke her." Dr. May's voice was a little low. "I know the director here. I'll just inform him." As he spoke, he sighed, "She looks quite pitiful." "Oh, right, where's her boyfriend?" The last time they saw each other, they were so lovey-dovey. It had been so long. Even if they had come from the moon, they should have rushed back. Pei Chi pursed her lips and did not say anything. Dr. May was also an experienced person, so she only sighed. Later, when he saw Pei Huan, she was already asleep. When he woke up, it was already 8:00 in the evening. Pei Chi had been sitting and watching over him. Tang Yu went back at 5:00 in the afternoon and just came over. He brought Pei Chi's food and Pei Huan's tonic soup. Pei Chi was quite touched. She knew that Tang Yu had never liked Pei Huan, but now he was willing to do these things. She did not say anything and just hugged him. At this moment, Pei Huan woke up. She asked in a low voice, "Do you want to go to the toilet?" Pei Huan could not move, so she could only use the chamber pot. Pei Huan shook her head. Her eyes instinctively looked around, but she did not see old Kansas. Her voice was hoarse. "He didn't come, did he?" Pei Chi reached out and touched her forehead. Her voice was gentle. "Pei Huan, I'm here." Chapter 978. Pei Huan smiled. "I used to naively think that I was pregnant, that I loved him wholeheartedly, and that the child and I were everything to him. If nothing had happened to the child and he had gone to save Su Mo, she would still be angry when he came back. But as long as he was willing to coax her, she would understand and forgive him. But she was bleeding at the time." Pei Huan's tears came out again. She reached out to wipe them away gently, but she felt tired every time she lifted her head. She laughed self-deprecatingly. "Chi, look at my tears. They're like free tap water." Pei Chi wiped her tears with a tissue. "Don't cry. It's not good for the child." "Child." Pei Huan caressed her stomach gently. She hadn't expected the child to be saved, but it had nothing to do with Kan Mingzhu anymore. She suddenly closed her eyes. Chi-Chi, if he comes, tell him I don't want to see him. Pei Chi-Chi was stunned. Although she was angry and thought that Pei Huan wouldn't want Old Can anymore, the child was still alive. She still hoped that they could get back together, but it seemed impossible now. But Old Can still couldn't come. He only called in the middle of the night and hung up after knowing that the child was fine. He didn't explain anything. Pei Chi-Chi heard a weak cry on the other end. It was Sumo's voice. They were still together. But Old Can and Pei Huan didn't expect fate to be so coincidental. Sumo and Pei Huan were staying in the same hospital. Pei Chi-Chi almost wanted to smash her phone. She didn't dare let Pei Huan know that she had picked up the call outside. Pei Huan had finally fallen asleep. However, she did not know that Pei Huan had already woken up when her phone rang. She remembered that Old Can's ringtone on Chi-Chi's phone was special, and it could be recognized immediately. Pei Huan's tears rolled down. She finally gave up. Pei Chi-Chi returned to the ward. She wanted to see Pei Huan, but she saw that her face was covered in tears. Pei Huan didn't cry. She turned to look at Pei Chi-Chi and said calmly, "Chi-Chi, I'm done with him. Don't worry about me. I'll live a good life in the future and pretend that I've never met this man." She chuckled softly, "In the future, I will help my child find a good father." Pei Chi-Chi was sad, but Pei Huan comforted her, "It's okay, Chi-Chi. What's so good about Kunmingju? He's old, not handsome, and has no money. Other than being good in bed, he doesn't have any good points." Every time she said something, Pei Chi-Chi would agree with her. As they talked, they both laughed and cried. Yes, it was no big deal. They would raise the child together and find a good father in the future. Finally, Pei Huan fell asleep again, but Pei Chi-Chi could not fall asleep. There was something she had to do. Early in the morning, Shen Lian walked into the company hall in a rare good mood. However, she heard a voice behind her that she could recognize even if she was reduced to ashes. Shen Lian turned around. Pei Chi-Chi stood there, dressed in black, like a messenger of vengeance from hell. There were a few elite people behind her, and more importantly, there were 4 bodyguards. Shen Lian instinctively called for security. Pei Chi-Chi looked at her and chuckled, "Jean Taiha's management is not good enough. I can't even see a single security guard. Did you send all of them to rape others?" Shen Lian calmed down slowly. They were in public, what could Pei Chi-Chi do to her? She sneered, "Why, are you here to avenge Sumo or Pei Huan? Save it, Pei Chi-Chi. Kunmingju is now with Sumo and they can't be separated. Your good-for-nothing sister is probably going to become an unwed mother." Pei Chi-Chi looked calm. "Is that so? But I'm curious, if you lose everything, will you still be so arrogant, oh? Chapter 979. Shen Lian's face was filled with panic. Her pupils constricted and she immediately opened the document. She did not believe that there was such a will in the world. But it did exist. She threw the document on the floor and Shen Lian raised her head. "I won't admit it. My father has lost his mind. These are fake. Whether it's real or not, the judicial department will verify it." Pei Chi-Chi looked at her coldly. "Shen Lian, now that we're done with business, let's talk about private matters." Shen Lian took a step back and looked at Pei Chi-Chi warily. "What are you trying to do?" Pei Chi-Chi stepped forward and she stepped back. Shen Lian waved her hands wildly. "What are you trying to do, Pei Chi-Chi? Are you crazy? This is Jean Taiha, the property of the Shen family, and you're just a bastard. What right do you have to behave atrociously on my land?" She even raised her hand and aimed it at Pei Chi-Chi, wanting to slap her. However, Pei Chi-Chi grabbed Shen Lian's hand and gave her a backhand slap. Shen Lian's face swelled up. She used all her strength in that slap. Even Pei Chi-Chi's hand hurt. Before Shen Lian could react, Pei Chi-Chi slapped her again. This time, it was on the other side of her face. Jean Taiha's office hall was filled with exclamations. Many employees took a few steps back. God, their president Shen had been slapped by someone, and it was in his territory. No one dared to step forward to stop Pei Chi-Chi's momentum. She looked at Shen Lian and said coldly, "These two slaps, one is for Tang Xian, and the other is for Pei Huan. Shen Lian, in the future, don't even think about hurting the people around me. If you hurt them once, I can guarantee that you will pay back double." Shen Lian wanted to raise her hand, but the people behind Pei Chi-Chi stepped forward and held her down. Shen Lian couldn't move. Pei Chi-Chi went forward and looked at her expressionlessly. "Are you in pain? You know pain, but don't you feel pain when you hurt them?" Shen Lian chuckled. "Pei Chi-Chi, I'm in pain, but aren't you in more pain than me? Pei Huan's matter has touched your nerves, hasn't it? You lost your child too. And Tang Xian, you have no idea how pitiful she looked when she died. She was so skinny. It's a pity, you couldn't see it. You lunatic." Pei Chi-Chi slapped her again. "You're a lunatic who wouldn't even let her own father off." Also, Pei Chi-Chi didn't like Su Mo, because at this time, Su Mo still had evil intentions towards a pregnant woman and wanted to snatch Kan Mingzhu away. But Su Mo's life was indeed ruined by Shen Lian. Shen Lian was so cruel to Su Mo just to deal with Pei Huan and make her unhappy. She was not human. Shen Lian chuckled sarcastically. "Pei Chi-Chi, other than slapping me, what else can you do to me? Can the dead come back to life? Can Su Mo forget the fact that she was gang raped? Can Mingzhu and Pei Huan reconcile?" There was a hint of madness in her eyes. "All of these hurt you, right? Oh. Pei Chi-Chi, as long as it hurts you, I will do it." "Really?" Pei Chi-Chi grabbed her hand and pushed her against a big vase behind her. As long as she pressed hard, the vase would fall to the ground, and Shen Lian might be pierced to death by the broken pieces. Shen Lian's face was distorted with fear. "Pei Chi-Chi, how dare you do this? You don't dare. Is that so? Let's see if I dare or not." Pei Chi-Chi quickly pressed her down. Chapter 980. Shen Lian was still being held by Pei Chi-Chi. However, her body was trembling and there was a puddle of water under her skirt. Many of the employees covered their noses and looked at their superior President Lian in disbelief. To think that she was so scared that she wet her pants just like that. How gutsy was she? How stupid was she? No matter what, Pei Chi-Chi couldn't possibly kill someone in public, right? Shen Lian pursed her lips and screamed out, "Pei Chi-Chi, I'm going to kill you." She was in a frenzy and could not wait to grab a knife and kill Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi-Chi loosened her grip and Shen Lian fell forward. If not for her subordinate supporting her, she would have been disfigured. "Shen Lian, unfortunately, this is what I wanted to say to you as well." Pei Chi-Chi's face was cold. Shen Lian looked at her and seemed to see Tang Yu's shadow. Pei Chi-Chi continued coldly, "Others might be able to stab you in the back, but they just don't want to do it." Shen Lian's entire face trembled violently and lost her original beauty and smugness from this morning. She almost shook off the hyaluronic acid on her face. When Pei Chi-Chi got ruthless, it was a ruthlessness that no one could imagine. At this moment, she was like a little female beast that was burning with the flames of battle. Shen Lian chuckled. "All right, Pei Chi-Chi. Let's do it openly then. I'd like to see if you can get that 20%. With Shen Zhongshan in that state, she could turn Pei Chi-Chi's will into a piece of scrap paper with just a few tricks. Furthermore, her identity had not been made public, right? What right did she have to get 20%? Shen Lian could totally stand on the moral high ground and turn Pei Chi into the target of everyone's condemnation. Therefore, Shen Lian's whole body reeked of urine, and the little flame of anger was reignited. Her whole body was on fire, and she was full of urine. Pei Chi's lips curled into a cold smile as she stared into Shen Lian's eyes. I promise that if you do anything to the people around me again, I will beat you up so badly that you won't be able to find your way home. She reached out and grabbed Shen Lian's hand. Just like when you came looking for me, I told you that I, Pei Chi, have never lost a fight. Otherwise, she would have been killed by that naughty lass, Pei Huan. Shen Lian's lips trembled, and she let out an intolerable roar, Pei Chi. Watch your image, President Shin. Pei Chi gestured for her to keep quiet and left with her men. Meanwhile, Shen Lian stood there. Her new assistant said in a trembling voice, President Shin, please change your clothes next time. I've even wet myself, through the piss. When Pei Chi returned to the hospital, she saw Lao Ken on the same floor. Lao Ken's appearance was definitely not good. He was still wearing the same clothes that he had worn for the wedding photo yesterday. His hair was covered in dust and mud, and so was his body. There was not a single clean spot on him. When he saw Pei Chi, he was also stunned. He was holding a small bag of fruits in his hand. When the fruits fell to the ground, it was the biggest panic that Kan Mingzhu had ever felt in her life. Pei Chi looked at Lao Ken and pursed her lips. She knew that Lao Ken had definitely not bought those fruits for Pei Huan. Even a fool would know who he had bought it for. Su Mo was pitiful, but wasn't Pei Huan pitiful too? Since Su Mo had been saved, shouldn't she rush back to visit her wife, who had almost miscarried her child? Did she need to stay by her side to give her hope? Pei Chi looked at Lao Ken quietly. She and Lao Ken had always had a good relationship, and they had spent many wonderful and happy times together. But at this moment, because of Pei Huan, she felt like a stranger. Chapter 981. Pei Chi said slowly with disappointment, if you hadn't met her, would you not have wanted to see her? Old Ken wiped his face and stared at Pei Chi. Chi, you know it's not like that. Then what is it? Pei Chi smiled. What do you think Pei Huan would have thought? What were you thinking when you abandoned her? Is Su Mo more important, or is Pei Huan and the child more important? You and Xiao Mei can send Pei Huan home. Old Ken said helplessly. He had never been so weak in his life, and he didn't think that he was lying. He was looking for an excuse. Pei Chi wasn't moved. You can find her, but can't you call the police? At that moment, it was his instinct that made him make the final judgment. Old Can's eyes widened like bells, and he stared at Pei Chi. Even you don't agree with me being with her. On the contrary, I want Pei Huan and the child to have a man to take care of them. But Old Can, your attitude shows that you're backing down. You don't even have any hope after you made a mistake, do you? Pei Chi's gaze seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. She paused and continued, I know that I'm being mean to you, because Su Mo is also a victim. But Pei Huan might not be able to forgive you. It wasn't just Pei Huan. Old Can couldn't forgive himself either. After he saved Su Mo, she hugged him and cried all the way from the scene to the hospital. She hugged him the whole night and didn't let him leave. Even though she knew that Pei Huan was in the hospital, she didn't let go of him. She was in a state of extreme insecurity. Old Can felt helpless, and he felt guilty to Pei Huan. Pei Chi was right. Su Mo was innocent, but Pei Huan was even more innocent as his wife. The more Su Mo pestered him, the more he felt guilty to Pei Huan, even though he had never wanted to be with Su Mo. Old Can squatted down and picked up the fruit slowly. can I go see her? Pei Chi only felt sad. They were so good before, and they were about to get married. Now he wanted to see Pei Huan, but he had to ask her if she could. Of course. Pei Chi sounded a little choked up. Old Canned, to be honest, I hope that you can be with her. However, it was wholehearted. Old Can was also sad. He raised his head and said, Chi, if I had a second chance, I can't guarantee that I would change my choice. Pei Chi understood and could understand, but from Pei Huan's point of view, she could not forgive him. Lao Can walked into the ward quietly while Pei Chi stood outside. In the white ward, Pei Huan was lying down. Her face was as pale as a piece of white paper. She was only a 23-year-old girl. Lying there at this time, it was as if she had experienced a lifetime. She fell asleep, but she felt uneasy because she kept dreaming of Lao Kansas. She dreamed of him and Su Mo standing on the balcony, of him taking off his gown to look for Su Mo, and even of them getting married. Su Mo came to the wedding and Lao Can and Su Mo left. Pei Huan woke up with a start. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw Old Can standing by the bed, looking disheveled. However, she was not the reason why he looked disheveled. Pei Huan looked at Old Can quietly, tears welling up in her eyes. If Chi were to see this, she would definitely scold her for being useless. Pei Huan wiped her eyes and said in a choked voice, "Look at you. You've made yourself look like this. Even your eyes are red." Her gentleness and calmness made Old Can feel like dying. Chapter 982. He was tearing up. His heart wasn't rough. The calmer Pei Huan was, the more it meant that he couldn't forgive her. Pei Huan felt the warmth of his large palm and smiled silently. Old Can, the child is still here. He's still in my tummy. Old Can closed his eyes. She's staying here too, right? Pei Huan wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. She felt that she was very manly at this moment. You should go back and accompany her. It would be great if she could take a photo and show it to Chi. Chi would know that she was strong now. Old Can's entire face was trembling uncontrollably, and his bearded face was contorted. Pei Huan looked at him and reached out to touch his beard. Old Can, this beard will no longer be mine from now on, he said in a soft voice. He grabbed her hand and closed his eyes. As long as you're willing, it's still yours. Will it still be mine? Pei Huan's voice was very soft. I don't want it if it's incomplete. She tilted her head and looked at him. Now that they met again, she felt resentment but not hatred. After all, Old Can had saved her before. She loved him before, and she still loved him now. It was just that she would rather give it up because it was incomplete. Pei Huan wiped her tears again and turned her head to look at the ceiling. You can see the child in the future. You're still his father, but it's impossible for us to be together. Although it was difficult, she still managed to say it. Look, it wasn't that difficult. Just saying that made her nose sour again. She felt very sad. Old Can was the same. He stared at her and couldn't say a word for a long time. He had expected it, but he didn't expect Pei Huan to be so resolute. Pei Huan tilted her head and looked at Old Kansas. A beautiful smile appeared on her lips, piercing Old Can's eyes. At that time, he knew that this young lady was strong enough and might not need him in the future. However, he wasn't there when she was in the most pain. What right did he have to ask for her forgiveness? Old Can's heart was in turmoil, and there was a hint of sweetness in his mouth. At this moment, Su Mo appeared at the door silently. She was dressed in white like a ghost. Pei Chi stopped her at the door. Miss Su, this is Pei Huan's ward. Su Mo struggled, but to no avail. She pursed her lips and looked at Lao Kansas. Mingzhu, the doctor wants me to draw blood. I'm scared. At this moment, it was as if Su Mo and Pei Huan had been flipped. She had turned into a young lady in her 20s. Pei Chi saw that Pei Huan's expression was still rather calm. She let go of Su Mo and said coldly, "It's good that you made it clear." Su Mo looked at Lao Kan with a bitter expression. Mingzhu, I'm not trying to ruin your relationship with Pei Huan. I just want you to spend some time with me. Pei Huan sat up slightly and smiled lightly. His time will be yours from now on. Su Mo's face was as pale as Pei Huan's. She looked straight at Lao Kan, hoping that he would take a stand. Su Mo had been around for so many years, she was not stupid. She was ruined. Those men had even taken pictures of her, and they had probably leaked out by now. She couldn't have children, and her reputation was ruined. However, she had money. If she and Kan Mingzhu fell in love, they could go abroad to a place where no one knew them. She didn't want those people to look at her and guess what was wrong with her body anymore. Su Mo admitted that she was selfish, but Kan Mingzhu was hers. Pei Huan was in the middle. Chapter 983. Pei Chi could see the determination in Su Mo's eyes. Pei Huan couldn't deal with this woman. She said softly, "Su Mo, I know you're a victim this time, but Pei Huan can't take it anymore. If there's anything between you and Old Kan, you can settle it privately. I just want to say one thing. Perhaps you feel a lot of pain, but the most painful thing in this world is death. Su Mo, you're a woman too. Please understand Pei Huan." Pei Chi added, "I think Old Kan will feel guilty towards Pei Huan if something happens to the child. He won't be with you even if he dies." Su Mo was stunned by her words. She had always liked Pei Chi, but she hadn't expected her to be so direct. She seemed to have seen through her thoughts. Pei Chi smiled. "As for whether Old Kan will be with you in the end, you have to ask him. Su Mo, you're a woman too. Don't you think you're hurting Pei Huan by clinging to him like this?" Su Mo was stunned. She smiled bitterly after a while. "Yes, I understand." Pei Chi turned around and looked at Old Kansas. "It's up to Old Kan to decide whether he can be with him or not. You can't just provoke Pei Huan and cause her to miscarry the child." Her words were harsh, but they really pierced Su Mo's heart. Pei Chi was a young lady who was 100 times better than Pei Huan. With Pei Chi around, it was really difficult for her to take Old Kan away. Pei Huan would have fallen out with Old Kan long ago. Su Mo knew that a sad woman was the most pitiful. Pei Chi knew that even better. After a while, Pei Huan looked at Old Kansas. "You can leave. I don't have anything to help you with." Old Kan's eyebrows twitched. He really didn't want to leave, but Su Mo was there, so he could only leave with her, afraid that he would provoke Pei Huan. However, he didn't realize that he had already provoked Pei Huan by leaving with Su Mo. After they left, the door closed. Pei Chi came over and sat on the bed. "Pei Huan, don't think too much. Put yourself and your child first, understand?" She rarely spoke to Pei Huan in such a gentle manner. To a certain extent, she was comforting Pei Huan. Pei Huan immediately burst into tears. She hugged Pei Chi and said, "Chi, is it because I was too bad in the past that I don't deserve happiness?" Pei Chi also felt a little sad in her heart, and patted her head. "Nonsense, it will be better in the future." She could tell that Old Kan was leaning towards Pei Huan, but with Su Mo's interference, Pei Huan and Old Kan would definitely fall apart. So, why not let Old Kan figure out what he wanted? Sob. Chi, I feel like a failure. I thought that I had picked up an old man who treated me so well. I was overjoyed and thought that I had found my true love. But I didn't expect that this old man was secondhand. Pei Huan wailed and was extremely sad. Pei Chi could only hug her. Perhaps crying a little was also good. Pei Huan cried so hard that it shook the heaven and earth. Pei Chi did not comfort her. It was like a child playing around. It was lonely without an audience. Pei Huan cried and pinched Pei Chi's arm. She choked and said, "Chi, can you comfort me? Call me Huan Huan." At that moment, Pei Chi seemed to have seen Tang Axian. Chapter 984. Pei Chi called her, but Pei Huan cried even louder. Pei Chi felt that Pei Huan didn't need a sister, but a mother. She was like Pei Huan's mother now. Old Kent accompanied Su Mo to take her blood and went to the ward with her. Both of them were silent. Su Mo had a feeling that Old Can was going to tell her everything. She sat on the bed and spoke before he could. "Mingzhu, you know what I'm thinking, don't you?" Old Can stared at her for a long time and didn't say anything. After a while, he said softly, "Yes, Su Mo, I know. But I can't promise you." "Why?" Su Mo's voice was full of vulnerability. "I know you've always had me in your heart. Old Can, you asked me if I was willing to be with you last time because I knew I couldn't have children, so I rejected you. But now, I feel that you're the only one who treats me the best in this world." Old Can was a little annoyed. He looked at Su Mo and said, "Pei Huan is pregnant." In his heart, there was a softness that stealthily hardened. How could Su Mo make such a request when Pei Huan was pregnant? Su Mo's face was gloomy. "You think I'm dirty, don't you?" "No. Su Mo, I can't bear to leave Pei Huan and the child." He looked at her seriously and said, "I'll accompany you until you're discharged. I can even arrange for you to go abroad, but I can't be with you anymore in the future." Su Mo looked at the man in front of her as if he was a stranger. After a while, she said dryly, "I thought it was your choice to save me." Old Ken smiled bitterly and didn't explain. This kind of thing couldn't be explained. Pei Huan misunderstood, and so did Su Mo. At that time, he only thought that Pei Huan had someone by her side, while Su Mo was alone. If he was the only one by Pei Huan's side at that time, he wouldn't have left her. But Old Ken wouldn't say that. He looked at Su Mo gently like an old friend and said, "Su Mo, I've fallen in love with Pei Huan." To Su Mo, it was undoubtedly the end of the world. However, Old Ken still stayed to take care of Su Mo until she was discharged and went abroad. When he returned to B City, Pei Huan had already been discharged from the hospital. He called her cell phone, but it was turned off. He called Xiao Mei's cell phone, and Xiao Mei told him that Pei Huan had moved back to her original place. As for Pei Huan's things at his place, he would have to trouble Mr. Can to pack them up, and she would pick a day to get them. Little Mei's tone was particularly polite. She did not shed all pretense of cordiality. On one hand, it was because of her professionalism. On the other hand, Pei Huan had grown up and felt that there was no need to shed all pretense of cordiality with Old Kansas. When Lao Can put down his phone, his eyes were empty. He stood under the autumn sun, but he didn't feel a trace of warmth. He returned to the apartment and looked at Pei Huan's clothes in the closet. Row after row, there were so many of them. She would always complain about how much she spent as she dragged back truckloads of clothes. Most of them were pajamas. She liked to wear black lace to tease him at night. Lao Can's rough fingers held the delicate and sexy fabric, and there was a trace of pain on his face. He packed her clothes, but he still left some in his apartment. It took 3 large suitcases to pack, and he drove the off-road vehicle to her villa. It was a European-style building with a market value of about 50 million. Chapter 985. He stared straight ahead. Then, Xiao Mei came out and asked the servants to move the things. Xiao Mei stayed behind to talk to old Kansas. Pei Huan said that you don't have to look for her anymore. When the child is born, she will inform you to see her. She said that you are the child's father after all. She won't be so cruel. Old Kan's eyes were burning. He felt extremely uncomfortable. But what could he do no matter how uncomfortable he was? His willful little girl was gone. He was the one who killed her. Old Kan stood outside and leaned against the car. He smoked half a pack of cigarettes before leaving. Upstairs, Pei Huan was lying down to protect the baby. Before the child was 6 months old, she had to lie down. It was painful, but she was willing. She loved this child. She loved this child, whether she and old Kan were together or not. Pei Chi stood in front of the window and watched for a long time. Then, she turned to look at Pei Huan. Have you really decided not to forgive old Kan? He has been standing outside for a long time. He is so pitiful. Pei Huan did not say anything. She was eating an apple. Recently, Pei Huan had become a pig. Pei Chi looked at her eagerly. She was a little puzzled. She was eating so much, but she did not get fat. Pei Huan finished eating and licked her hands. What's there to be pitiful about? Didn't you go abroad with Su Mo a while ago? Pei Chi smiled. Su Mo is not coming back, right? She has settled in Canada. Pei Huan said sourly, she only came to see me after she was done with her work. Who cares? Pei Huan was a little angry at first, but she became more serious. Chi, don't try to persuade me. I have made up my mind. She said in a low voice, without him, I will live like a child. Pei Chi did not try to persuade her anymore. She knew that what happened that day was an insurmountable hurdle for Pei Huan. In the afternoon, she returned to the rose garden. Tang Yu was leaning against the living room, reading an English book. What made Pei Chi angry was that Xiao Qi was sitting beside him obediently. That obedient demeanor really resembled her. She kicked the door in dissatisfaction. She was already back. Why did he still keep it? Could it be that it had a special use? Tang Yu heard her voice and looked up at her. Then, he smiled and patted the seat beside him. Come and sit. There was still an hour before dinner. Mr. Tang had a little plan in his mind. Pei Chi stood at the door and didn't move. There's no space there. Tang Yu looked at Seven and smiled, go play at the side. That little Seven actually knew how to be jealous and just sat there without moving. Pei Chi glanced at Tang Yu with a hint of mockery in her eyes. Tang Yu smiled. Jealous again. He got up and didn't turn off Seven. He walked to Pei Chi and pulled her into his embrace. Lowering his head, he searched for her little mouth and kissed it deeply. Oh. These days, because of Pei Huan, he hadn't touched her for 10 days. This kiss was a little out of control. Pei Chi was furious at first, but being kissed like this and his large palm moving into her sweater, she was a little moved. As he kissed, he stumbled onto the sofa. He didn't remove everything and just came directly. Today, Tang Yu was a little rough. He felt like he was hugging a ball of fire, and she didn't need his gentleness. When they were aroused, any words were superfluous. All that was left was possession, sweat, and touching entanglement. Chapter 986. That loud cry made Pei Chi laugh instead. She kicked Tang Yu's back with her tender little feet, and her little face had a somewhat seductive expression. Tang Yu, your little baby is crying. At that moment, Tang Yu was closing his eyes and enjoying himself. She kicked him with her little feet, and he almost collapsed. He opened his eyes, and there was a meaningful look in his eyes. He grabbed her little hand and pressed her down. When she couldn't control herself, he bit her little ear and whispered in a low voice, "Now you are my little baby." Her little face was so red that it seemed as if blood was dripping out. She bit her lip. He was really shameless. Tang Yu chuckled and carried her whole body to the side of Xiao-Qi. In front of Xiao-Qi, although the other party was just a robot, Pei Chi-Chi also felt pressure and a sense of shame. She closed her eyes, and her long eyelashes fluttered slightly. She bit her little mouth, and it was extremely seductive. Tang Yu kissed her, laughed in a low voice, and said shameless words in her ear. This relationship, Pei Chi-Chi didn't want to think about it again even if she was beaten to death. That was too shameless. Later, she shut Xiao-Qi in the cabinet in the study, and he was not allowed to take it out again. Sitting at the dining table, Mr. Tang touched his chin seriously. "Chi-Chi, if you do this, we will lose a lot of fun." Pei Chi-Chi looked at him, and her eyes were seductive. Tang Yu smiled. At night, he occupied her for a full 3 hours. When he let go of her, both of them were sweaty. Pei Chi-Chi was wrapped in a small blanket, and she lay in Tang Yu's arms like a little beast. She chirped a few times, and her little face covered in sweat was buried in the side of his neck. The two of them were entangled like fishes having fun. She buried her face and said in a muffled voice, "Tang Yu, why do I feel like you're on drugs today?" Her tone was dissatisfied and pitiful. She didn't even have the strength to move her little finger. Tang Yu smiled, lowered his head, and kissed her little mouth for a while. Her whole body went soft in his arms, moaning softly, her little hands also quietly wrapped around his neck. Tang Yu turned over and covered her. He kissed her little mouth and murmured, "Chi-Chi, why would I need to take any medicine when you're begging me so softly?" She wanted to deny it, but when she looked into his clear eyes, she closed her eyes and moved her slightly swollen lips closer to his. He was drenched in sweat again. After it was over, he carried her to wash up. This time, not only her, but Tang Yu was also almost done. After everything was over, they lay under the blanket together. Pei Chi-Chi couldn't help but think of Pei Huan again, and she couldn't help but feel a little sad. Tang Yu leaned against the headboard and smoked. He only dared to smoke half a cigarette before putting it away. He looked down at the little person in his arms and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" Pei Chi-Chi looked at him. "I'm thinking, will you feel bad when we go to Jintaihe tomorrow? Will you be like old Can?" Tang Yu pinched her little face with all his might. "Stop talking nonsense. See, you're angry now." Pei Chi-Chi pouted. "I know you can't bear to." Tang Yu smiled bitterly. "This little bastard. Tang Yu, do you know? I really wanted to kill her that day. She was so cruel to Su Mo and Pei Huan because of personal grudges. It's not a big deal. Is she also this cruel to Tang Xian?" Pei Chi-Chi's voice was a little absent-minded. "Tang Xian is her sister and she watched her grow up. How can she be so cruel? Oh. Chapter 987. On Monday, in the conference room of Jintaihe Company, Pei Chi-Chi, together with Lawyer Qin and Little Wen Dink, formally announced Shen Zhongshan's will to Shen Lian and the directors of Jintaihe. Lawyer Chen had a benevolent look on his face. After the announcement, he looked at Shen Lian. "Miss Shen, that's about it. If you have any other ideas, you can bring them up." Shen Lian sneered. "My father has gone crazy. You suddenly got such a so-called will. I think not only me, but the directors of Jintaihe will also not agree to it." She looked at Pei Chi-Chi and began to slander her. "Moreover, Pei Chi-Chi, you have hidden my father with evil intentions. After all, what you are after is the Shin family's property. She said word by word, not only will I not give it to you, but I will also sue you for abducting an old man. Pei Chi looked at her. It seemed that Shin Lian had been prepared for this. Her expression was calm. If you want to sue, go ahead. But I still advise you not to do that. Otherwise, you probably won't even know how you die. You don't have to worry about it. Shin Lian's pupils shrank. She suddenly remembered that Tang Yu had something on her. She must not sue Shin Zhongshan. She looked at Pei Chi with wariness in her eyes. In the end, because of Shin Lian's refusal to cooperate, the judicial department intervened. In the middle of this, Shin Lian operated a little. To put it bluntly, someone from the relevant department coveted Shin Lian's beauty. That person had always been a pervert. He would side with whoever slept with him. There was no one else. After more than a month of evidence collection, it was finally proved that the will was fake. It was forged by Pei Chi. Shin Lian stood on the defendant's stand. Her voice was filled with pride as she looked at Pei Chi. Pei Chi, this world will not change because of you. You can't do whatever you want. The same applies to you, Shin Lian. Pei Chi looked at the prosecutor. I only have one question. Is this signature fake? Is the hospital certificate on it fake too? A certain prosecutor said calmly, the current situation is that the person is no longer conscious, so you said that the person wrote it when he was sober. Then why didn't you take it out earlier? Why wait until now? How many years has it been? Pei Chi chuckled. Then how can we prove that this is real? The person with the highest authority had been yawning for the past few days. His face was cloudy as he looked at Pei Chi with a lecherous smile. If Shin Zhongshan wakes up now, he will naturally be able to tell if this is real or fake. Shin Lian was also proud. In this life, Shin Zhongshan would never wake up. Pei Chi looked at Shin Lian. Her heart was clear. She had already guessed that Shin Lian probably took off her clothes out of habit. However, was it worth it for this? How would such a debauchee treat her in bed? She could figure it out even with her toes. Really? Pei Chi said softly and firmly, Mr. Shin Zhongshan is outside. The doctor approved by the judicial department is also here. He can verify whether Mr. Shin's mental condition is normal. Shin Lian was shocked. The person standing on the top also changed his face. How could this be possible? At this time, the door of the court was opened. The sunlight from outside suddenly shone in, stinging Shin Lian's eyes. Who else could it be but Shin Zhongshan, who walked in calmly from outside? Chapter 988. Shin Zhongshan slowly walked to the chief inspector. This was his good friend for many years. Now, really good. For his own selfish desire, he slept with his daughter on the same bed. Shin Zhongshan's old friend slept with his daughter just for his own selfish desire. Being stared at by Shin Zhongshan, the chief inspector sighed in his heart. With just one look, he knew that he was normal. Shin Lian was stunned. Her lips trembled and her voice trembled. Dad! How could you? How could you? Shin Zhongshan turned his head and looked at Shin Lian. Do you still remember that I'm your father? Shin Lian remembered how she had tortured Shin Zhongshan in the past. She bit her lips, but after a while, there was a touch of coldness in her eyes. Why did she need to feel guilty? Shin Zhongshan had been acting all along. She stared at him. You knew that Pei Chi needed bone marrow, but you couldn't donate it yourself, so you pretended to be crazy, right? Even Tang Yu didn't know the answer to this question, and so did Pei Chi. Shin Zhongshan didn't answer directly. He just said, these are not the most important things. Shen Lian looked at her father. There was no warmth in his eyes, only hostility. Yes, they were enemies now. In his heart, there was only Pei Chi-Chi. Shen Lian sneered. It seems that all of you are here today to kill me. She looked up and looked at Pei Chi-Chi. So what if you get 20%? I'm still the biggest shareholder of Jean Taihe. As she said this, her eyes fell on Shen Zhongshan's face. Dad, you won't even give me this chance, right? She gambled that Shen Zhongshan wanted to save his face. Under such an occasion, if Shen Zhongshan didn't give her a way out, people would definitely criticize her. But Shen Lian didn't know that face was no longer important to Shen Zhongshan. To Shen Zhongshan, the most important thing was to train Pei Chi-Chi. Therefore, he said indifferently, of course. At this moment, Pei Chi-Chi said, Uncle Shen, I refuse Jean Taihe's 20% gift. In her eyes, there was a resolute look, faintly revealing the demeanor of Shen Zhongshan when he was young. Shen Zhongshan admired her and did not stop her. He knew that she had other plans. Shen Lian was stunned for a moment. Then, she cursed in her heart. Pei Chi-Chi didn't want it. Is it fun to sue her? She had slept with him for nothing. Shen Lian's face darkened. She glared at Pei Chi-Chi. Are you not happy? Pei Chi-Chi looked at Shen Lian innocently. I thought you would be very happy. Shen Lian gritted her teeth. Yes, I'm very happy. Then, she looked at Shen Zhongshan and put on a fake smile. Dad, why didn't you inform me that you've recovered? I could have brought you and Mom back to live. Shen Zhongshan rejected indifferently. Your mother and I will live in the place that Tang Yu arranged for us. It's quite good. Shen Lian felt as if she had been slapped in the face. Shen Zhongshan and Pei Chi-Chi went out together. Tang Yu was behind them. There was already a large group of reporters waiting outside. It was originally an economic lawsuit. But now that Shen Zhongshan had appeared, the outside world was even more curious about the relationship between Shen Zhongshan and Pei Chi-Chi. After all, Jean Taihe's 20% was a big deal. Chapter 989. Pei Chi-Chi stood beside Shen Zhongshan, accepting the reporter's crazy photos and questions. Mr. Shen, can you explain your relationship with President Pei? Shen Zhongshan smiled faintly. I've made a lot of mistakes in the past. Chi-Chi is my daughter. We've already done a paternity test. Here, I am very grateful to a deceased person, Mr. Pei Mingyi. He taught Chi-Chi so well and loved my daughter like a pearl in his palm. Pei Chi-Chi was a little moved. Yes, even though Pei Mingyi did not have many good points, he had always been the best father in her heart. The reporters were in an uproar. They had guessed it long ago, but they did not expect Shen Zhongshan to be so frank about such a thing. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips and stood beside Shen Zhongshan. There were indeed some similarities between their brows. This group photo grabbed all the headlines. People seemed to have forgotten that Shen Zhongshan had a daughter named Shen Lian. Shen Lian kept looking at them, her heart as cold as water. Her father was finally no longer her father. He had woken up and she was terrified. What were they trying to do? When Pei Chi-Chi did not make a move, Shen Lian was always in fear and her judgment was not as good as before. Coupled with her misdeeds in the past few years, she was no longer the capable Shen Lian of the past. Shen Lian sat in her office and smoked while Meng Qingqing stood in front of her desk. She finished a cigarette in frustration, then raised her head and looked at Meng Qingqing. Did you see that? After Boyi merged with Xingyuan, they kept on making big moves. They took down that piece of land in the south of B City and developed it into a large-scale residential area. In a place like B City, even the suburbs were priced at 50,000 yuan. Coupled with the rich and powerful facilities, there was no need to worry about sales. Moreover, it was a school district of a famous school. There was a hint of unwillingness in Shenlian's eyes. If it wasn't for you stopping me, I would have long gotten my hands on that piece of land. The profit this time around would be at least 10 billion. Meng Qingqing, where is your foresight? Meng Qingqing's lips curled into a cold smile. Do you think Jean Taihe can invest tens of billions at once? The shareholders will not agree. But Boyi was different. His predecessor was Xingyuan. Not to mention tens of billions, he could even invest hundreds of billions. It was just a drop in the ocean. To put it bluntly, Shenlian did not understand the current situation. Tang Yu had gotten rid of 20% of her worries. With his ability, he could easily play with Jean Taihe. Why did he not make a move now? That was for Pei Chichi to practice. Now that Pei Chichi was using the monster Bo Yi to deal with Jean Taihe, it would be a piece of cake. If it really didn't work out, there was Tang Yu. Of course, in her heart, Shenlian relied on Meng Qingqing, but she was also suspicious of him. Therefore, his words were mixed with the truth. She couldn't tell what he was talking about. Meng Qingqing sat on the sofa opposite her and swiped a few times with his phone. Then, with a cigarette in one hand, he held up the phone for her to see. Look, this piece of land will be publicly auctioned next month. It can be used to build a seaside villa resort. The place is quite big, but it's cheap. Most importantly, I have insider information that in the next year, Subway Line 3 will be extended here. When it is completed, the opening price will more than double. Chapter 990. Meng Qingqing seemed to have guessed what she was thinking, so he said calmly, a piece of land like this is marked at a low price, but if it's bought, the price will double. He looked at Shenlian. How about it, are you interested? Shenlian was a little tempted. The most profitable project now was real estate. Everyone was speculating in real estate, and there were many people who wanted to buy it. She and Meng Qingqing looked at each other for a while, then she stood up. Sort out the information and give it to me, I need it this afternoon. Okay. Meng Qingqing smiled, put his phone into his pocket, and finished the last puff of his cigarette. Just as he was about to leave, Shenlian stopped him. Qingqing, I saw that your phone's screensaver is still Tang Xian's photo. I think you are like me, you haven't forgotten the pain. Shenlian's face was cold. If you hate them, then let them go to hell. Meng Qingqing only took a deep look at her and didn't say anything. After he left, Shenlian smiled sinisterly. Pei Chichi, I want to see how long you can be happy. Now that she had calmed down, she understood it after thinking about it carefully. The reason why Tang Yu had a vasectomy was because Pei Chichi couldn't have another child. Her body wouldn't allow her to get pregnant again. Without children, she wanted to see how long Tang Yu's feelings for her could last. On the other side, Pei Chichi received a call, and she hung up with it. She turned her head and looked at Tang Yu, who was sitting on the sofa. She fell for it. Tang Yu smiled. It was not strange. Shenlian had always been competitive. Seeing Bo Yi's actions, how could she sit still? But the more impatient she was, the more Jean Taihe would be dragged down by her. When that time came, without the support of the shareholders, she couldn't do anything alone. Pei Chichi was in a good mood. She tidied up the things on her desk and looked at him. I want to visit Pei Huan later, and I'm going to Dad's place for dinner. Tang Yu, do you want to go with me? Tang Yu's gaze was focused on her little face the entire time. She reached out and touched her little face, feeling a little strange. What's wrong? He had a faint smile on his face as he slowly said, look at this, look at that, and tomorrow you have to look at Xiaoxin. Miss Pei, don't you feel that you have neglected Mr. Tang? As he spoke, he had already pushed her against the desk and pulled her into his embrace, trapping her. Her waist was very soft and she leaned back slightly. Her little hand grabbed his tie and pulled him closer to her. She purposely breathed out. Mr. Tang, I remember that you have a Xiao Qi at home. Why? Are you still not satisfied? He followed her strength and pressed down, causing her little face to turn red, but she still pretended not to care. Whether or not Xiao Qi can satisfy me, you know best, don't you? He nibbled on her little ear, and as he wished, he saw a blush rise behind it. At this moment, they were very close to each other. Their breaths were entwined, and they both let this warmth deepen. Tang Yu couldn't help it. He lowered his head and kissed the side of her face. His voice was a little hoarse. Chi-Chi, do you want to try the lounge here? Her little hand was still playing with his tie. Her voice was soft and her expression was innocent. President Tang, I remember that this is my office, and you are my subordinate. So, you can do whatever you want to me. He blew into her ear. Subordinates should be used to the extreme. That is what a capitalist is. Chapter 991. She bit her lips and glanced at him, but it was the first time they had sex apart from the first time's absurdity. At that time, he probably had a great desire to explore the female body, so he did not let go of any part of her body. In the end, that night of sex ended because of her period. Now that she thought about it, she still remembered that his face was dark at that time. He seemed to be very uncomfortable, and then he held her little hand and did that shameful thing. At that time, she did not know anything and was scared. Pei Chi-Chi was like a queen. What if I let you do it again? I'd love to. With that said, Tang Yu really squatted down. Pei Chi-Chi could not help but laugh and kicked him twice. Okay. I'm not playing anymore. But how could he let her go so easily after he had been flirted with? Her shoes were thrown to the side, and her little feet felt like they were about to burn. She felt itchy and numb. She wanted to kick him, but she could not bear to use force. In the end, she was kissed by him, this pervert. Later, she laid her whole body on his shoulder and hit him with her little hands. Don't. Xiao Ran will see when he comes in later. She was as soft as a little lamb. Tang Yu's heart skipped a beat. He was just teasing her, but now he was serious. He carried her to the lounge and threw her on the soft bed. He turned around and locked the door. When he stood at the end of the bed and raised his hand to unbutton his shirt, Pei Chi-Chi held her breath. She secretly scolded herself in her heart. After so long, she still failed to live up to her expectations and was seduced by him. He was so lustful, and he had to cure his disease. He had clearly said that he would do it once, but in the end, he kept doing it until noon. It was already time for lunch. Pei Chi-Chi glared at Tang Yu angrily. Chi-Chi, you have to forgive a man who has failed in his career. He needs to find all his confidence from women. When I heard you ask me to use more force and go faster, I felt a special sense of achievement. He leaned over and kissed her little mouth with endless satisfaction. Pei Chi-Chi wrapped herself in the blanket and stared at him with a gaze that made his hair stand on end. Tang Yu smiled. Boss Pei, please correct me if I've said anything wrong. I'll definitely strive for perfection next time so that Boss Pei will be happy at work every day. Pei Chi-Chi covered her ears and glared at him. Shameless, shameless. Tang Yu, why didn't I realize that you were so shameless in the past? She felt that she had been tricked. What nobility! What abstinence! They were all lies. Tang Yu tied his tie and looked neat. He bent down and placed his hands on both sides of her body. His eyes were burning. Pei Chi-Chi, that's because I haven't met you before. After meeting you, I became a beast. Now. He smiled faintly, becoming more noble and more shameless. Now I'm worse than a beast. She kicked a certain part of him. If you're so capable, why don't you change your body for me? Tang Yu propped himself up with one hand and cupped her delicate little chin with the other. He chuckled. So my Chi-Chi likes to be asterisk asterisk asterisk. She burrowed into the blanket and ignored him. When it came to shamelessness, she was far from his match. Yet, he could still say such shameless words with a straight face. Tang Yu looked at her and smiled. He reached out to release her little head from the blanket and said with a smile, Chi-Chi, aren't you afraid of being suffocated? Chapter 992. Now that Tang Yu was comfortable, he patiently coaxed her and teased his little pet. After teasing her for a while, Pei Chi-Chi said pitifully, Pei Huan is still waiting for me. Tang Yu kissed her and said, I'll take you there. Pei Chi-Chi still said pitifully, aren't you going to accompany me? He laughed and said, let's have dinner together. I'll go to my mother's place and pick you up at 5 in the afternoon. We'll go to Uncle Shen's place and sit for a while. Pei Chi-Chi nodded. Just as she was about to get up, Tang Yu had already removed the blanket from her body. He picked up her clothes and helped her put them on. She felt a little uncomfortable and buried her face in his chest, feeling warm and fuzzy. Tang Yu took care of her as if she was a child and helped her put on her clothes and dress. She sat in his arms, looking small and thin. After she was dressed, Tang Yu kissed her again and said in a hoarse voice, Chi-Chi, I wanted to do something worse than an animal just now. Pei Chi-Chi was speechless. She dared to laugh at him when he was driving. Pei Chi-Chi turned her head and looked at Tang Yu and asked with a little evil intention, Tang Yu, aren't your legs weak? You can try. He smiled and buckled his seatbelt. He checked her and then started the car. Pei Chi-Chi snorted softly. The car arrived at Pei Huan's place in half an hour. But as soon as they got out of the car, they saw Old Can's car was parked at the intersection. He stood there and looked into the villa with a sad look in his eyes. Tang Yu pulled Pei Chi-Chi over and kissed her. He smiled and said, this is the disadvantage of having slept with an ex-girlfriend. Pei Chi-Chi glanced at him and said, at least Old Can has this function. Did you have it at that time? Tang Yu patted her little butt. This child was getting more and more arrogant. Pei Chi-Chi walked over and looked at Old Can. After more than a month, Old Can had lost a lot of weight. She was angry before, but now that she saw him like this, no matter how hard her heart was, it softened. She asked, do you want to go in and have a look? Old Can heaved a long sigh. I don't have the face to see her. Back then, Pei Huan had made it very clear that he could see the child after it was born, and the child could also call him father. However, it was impossible for her and him. He really wanted to see her, so much so that he was going crazy. During these days when she wasn't around, Old Can finally realized how cute this bad-mouthed little girl was, and how much he liked her. Pei Chi-Chi looked at Lao Can and asked softly, what are your plans for the future? Old Can let out a long sigh. That's it. When she forgives me, we can get the certificate. Pei Chi-Chi provoked Lao Kansas, what if Pei Huan gets married to someone else? I'll tear him apart. Old Can glared. As long as he thought of Pei Huan's small body being pressed by someone else, he even had the intention to kill. Pei Chi-Chi smiled and provoked him again. Then let's go in and eat first. Old Can's gaze was a little resentful. After Pei Chi-Chi went in, she deliberately told Pei Huan about it during the meal. Xiaomei was also there. She was now working as Pei Huan's full-time nanny, just like the old maid. Qin Anlin didn't say anything, as if he was letting it go. Hearing Pei Chi talking about old Can, Xiao Mei looked up at her and then at Pei Huan. In fact, these days, old Can Mingzhu often hung around her door as if she had nothing to do. Chapter 993. Pei Huan was dazed for a moment before she smiled faintly. Just let him stand there. It'll get boring after a while and he'll leave. Pei Chi stopped teasing her and exchanged glances with Tang Yu. After dinner, Tang Yu left. Pei Chi helped Pei Huan upstairs to rest while she lay down for a while. After a few rounds of exercise, she slept more soundly than Pei Huan. She slept until 3:30 in the afternoon. When she woke up, she saw Pei Huan staring at her. "It's scary to look at me like that." Pei Huan lay down and sighed. "Pei Chi, if someone had told me in the past that we could lie together like this, I wouldn't have believed it even if they beat me to death." Pei Chi sighed too. "Yeah. You liked to bully me back then." Pei Huan shrieked, "Pei Chi, I've always been the one who suffered in the end." She looked at Pei Chi with resentment in her eyes, but she didn't dare to say anything. Pei Chi smiled. "I didn't expect that Pei Huan would be so cute after growing up." Pei Huan was shy. "Don't praise me like that. It's not good to tell the truth." Seeing her like this, Pei Chi felt that her mood should be a lot calmer. After the joke, Pei Huan got down to business. "I heard that you and Shan acknowledged each other." Pei Chi nodded absent-mindedly. Pei Huan couldn't help but say, "Pei Chi, you're acknowledging a thief as your father. Don't you think my father is good?" "Of course my father is good. But Shan is the one who provided the J." Pei Chi's voice was a little soft. "Pei Huan, do you know that if Shan didn't want to match Tang Xan's looks, things wouldn't have turned out like that? So you're soft-hearted." Pei Huan scoffed. "I've never seen you soft-hearted towards me before." Pei Chi smiled. "Isn't it good now?" Pei Huan pouted. "I admit that I'm a little jealous." Chi, who was originally old Pei's, had suddenly become old Shen's. Pei Huan hugged Pei Chi's arm. "You won't ignore me in the future, right?" So this was what she had been thinking about all this while. Pei Chi couldn't help but laugh. She pinched Pei Huan. "Silly girl." Pei Huan enjoyed it quite a bit. She felt that the beating was a sign of intimacy and the scolding was a sign of love. However, after being happy for a while, she still said, "Chi, I only have one. If you treat me as Tang Xan's substitute, then I'll do it for the rest of my life." After saying that, she fixed her gaze on Pei Chi and didn't move away for a moment. Pei Chi was a little stunned. After a long time, she slowly said, "Pei Huan, you are you. You are not anyone's substitute." Perhaps, there was a period of time when Pei Huan was just being silly. She really thought that way, but later on, it wasn't like that anymore. She thought that the main reason why she truly forgave Pei Huan and was willing to take care of her was because Pei Huan wasn't that bad. Compared to Shen Lian, Pei Huan was just a little more willful, but she hadn't done anything too evil. Perhaps, the reason why they reconciled was because they were too lonely. Pei Huan's lips trembled slightly. She didn't say anything else. Pei Chi turned her body sideways. "In the future, we still have many futures. Huan, as long as you're well." Pei Huan's heart instantly warmed. It didn't matter if she didn't have a man. She still had a child, Chi, Xiao Mei, and money. Chapter 994. Sure. Pei Chi also felt that it was a good thing that Pei Huan had calmed down a lot after what had happened. Fortunately, they were not married. If they were married, they would have asked for a divorce. Pei Huan yawned and felt sleepy again. When are you going to remarry Tang Yu? Pei Chi was a little embarrassed and mumbled, he didn't mention it. Pei Huan's eyes widened. He slept for nothing. Pei Chi thought of his slender body, perfect features, and superb skills. She coughed and said, actually, I didn't lose out. Pei Huan looked at her and rolled her eyes after a long time. Look at you, Pei Chi. Let me tell you, the most important thing about a man is not his appearance or his skills in bed. It's about his loyalty. Just like a dog, obedient, right? Pei Chi was dumbfounded. Weren't they talking about men? How did it get to do with dogs? Pei Huan sneered. Men are like dogs. Old Can is a stray dog that can't be tamed. Pei Chi felt sorry for Old Can for a few minutes, until Tang Yu came to pick her up. Pei Huan talked about how men were like dogs for an hour and a half. When Pei Chi got into the car and left, Old Can was still standing there, looking at them as if he was looking at the horizon. Pei Chi suddenly felt that Old Can would be miserable in the future. If he wanted to be forgiven, he would probably have to put a dog leash on him. But, he deserved it. Tang Yu was driving and noticed that she was secretly happy. He smiled and asked, "What are you happy about?" As he spoke, he took a sip of his iced coffee. Before he could swallow it, Pei Chi looked at him and said, Pei Huan said that men are all dogs today. Tang Yu spat out the coffee on the windshield in front of him. The car stopped at a red light. He looked at Pei Chi speechlessly. Chi, do you think dogs can make you feel so comfortable and satisfied? Pei Chi glared at him. Tang Yu reached out and touched her little face. All right, you can play with Pei Huan, but don't learn bad things from her. Pei Huan was frustrated at this moment, but Tang Yu didn't forget that Pei Huan used to be in the entertainment industry and did all kinds of bad things. His Chi was so innocent and adorable. He could not let her be corrupted. At this time, looking at Pei Huan's psychological shadow, Pei Chi is obviously worse. While Tang Yu was driving, he slowly told Pei Chi a piece of very good news. By the way, Jinrong also went to my mother's place. Chi, do you regret that you didn't go with me in the afternoon? Pei Chi bit her lips and secretly looked at his calm but actually jealous look. She wondered if Jinrong had provoked him, but she did not dare to ask. She didn't ask, and Tang Yu didn't say anything. He just took the time to look at her. That one glance had caused her to lose her soul. Why are you looking at me? Pei Chi's voice was like a little sheep's. Tang Yu's lips curled into a faint smile. It was very warm. At least, Pei Chi's heart was warmed. She couldn't help hugging his arm and put her face on his shoulder. At such a warm and touching moment, she heard Tang Yu's outrageous voice. Pei Chi, I'm thinking about what position to use at night. She sat down at once and flicked her hair. I'll go back to the apartment tonight. Tang Yu smiled. Oh. Chapter 995. When Tang Yu helped her out, Shen Zhongshan said worriedly, the child drank too much. Tang Yu, please take care of her. Tang Yu opened the car door and helped little drunk cat into the car. When he turned around, he looked at Shen Zhongshan and smiled. Uncle Shen, don't worry. I'll take good care of her. Mrs. Shen walked out and put a jacket on Shen Zhongshan's shoulders. She watched as Tang Yu opened the car door and got into the car. The black sports car soon disappeared into the night, but Shen Zhongshan was still standing at the door, watching. After a while, he asked, Su Xin, do you blame me? Mrs. Shen patted his shoulder. Zhongshan, it's getting cold. Let's go back. Shinjongshan chatted with her as they walked back. He sighed. I've liked Tangyu a lot since he was young. I didn't expect that he and Shin Lian would be fated to be together, but he didn't finish his sentence. He just patted Mrs. Shin. Zhongshan, I'm already so old. I should have gotten over it a long time ago. Mrs. Shin said softly. As long as the child is still here, I'll be satisfied. Shin Zhongshan hummed in agreement. Tang Yu was driving with Little Drunk Cat beside him. Little Drunk Cat's eyes were half closed. Her long hair was messy on her face. Her red lips were opened seductively and her thick eyelashes were quivering. Because of the alcohol, her body was hot. Soon, Little Drunk Cat wanted to roll down the car window. Tang Yu scolded her. You'll catch a cold. She groaned in discomfort. She tugged her collar open and felt more comfortable. At this time, it was already the beginning of winter. Her thin coat was thrown in the back seat, and she only had a dress on. She pulled it up carelessly, revealing half of her tender calves. Under the dim light, it looked very attractive. Tang Yu's fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly. His voice was low and hoarse. Chi-Chi, behave yourself. She leaned against the back of the seat and looked at him. She pouted. Tang Yu, it's so hot. Of course it was hot. In his heart, he was amused and angry at the same time. Tonight, Shinjongshan had brought out a strong foreign wine. She really dared to drink it. Just a small cup was enough to make him look like this. There was a red light in front, so he stopped the car slowly and looked at her sideways. He coaxed, be good, we'll be home soon. She answered naturally, then I can do whatever I want. Tang Yu's heart tightened. As a man, there were many uncontrollable imaginations in his mind at this time. His Adam's apple couldn't help but roll twice, and his voice was unbelievably hoarse. Chi-Chi, sure. But obviously, she was really drunk. Tang Yu only heard the sound of the seat belt being unbuckled. Then, horns blared from behind, one after another. He looked up and saw that it was a green light, so he immediately started the car and said sternly, Chi-Chi, fasten your seatbelt. However, not only did the little person not listen to him, but it also lay down. After a while, a furry little head popped out from the front of him and lay in his arms, crying out that it was even hotter. Tang Yu was annoyed and amused at the same time as he drove. He reached out and patted her little head. Chi-Chi, I'm driving. Her little head moved gently and her voice was like that of a baby. I just want to hug you. She added, you're the one who said that I can do whatever I want. Chapter 996. However, that was obviously not a good idea. He could only grit his teeth and say, Chi-Chi, be good and sit back down. Her little head was still wiggling, and in the end, she fell asleep on his lap. When they reached a red light, he looked down and sighed in his heart. Wasn't she afraid of being uncomfortable by curling up like this? He wanted to carry her back, but he couldn't bear to. He reached out and stroked her little head, driving steadily. When they reached the rose garden, Tang Yu took her coat and put it on her. He opened the door and carried her out of the car. She was probably fast asleep as she let him carry her. She didn't struggle at all. Tang Yu had wanted to do something tonight, but she was sleeping so soundly that he could only give up. After taking a shower, he came out wearing only his bathrobe. He looked at her curling up with the blanket, wearing the pajamas that he had changed into. He looked at her quietly for a while, then went to the wine cabinet to pour himself a glass of red wine. He drank it while looking at the beautiful scene on the bed. It was a beautiful picture. He put down the wine glass, walked over and kissed her. With one hand, he pulled the blanket away from her arms and aroused her passion like a bolt of lightning. The little wolf puppy was aroused by him. She opened her eyes and looked at him in a daze. Tang Yu leaned to the side and touched her little mouth with his fingers. He coaxed, "Chi-Chi, didn't you say that you could do whatever you want tonight?" Pei Chi-Chi howled and hugged his waist with her little hands. She rubbed against him like a rascal and said softly, "Tang Yu, do you really want me to do this and that?" Any man would be hot-blooded. The beast blood in his body was boiling. Tang Yu's voice was trembling. He lay flat and hugged her to sit in his arms. He reached out and caressed her little face. Finally, his long fingers landed on her little mouth. He caressed it gently, imagining 1,000 things in his mind. Pei Chi-Chi smiled naughtily and bit him. He let her bite him as if he was watching a puppy biting a bone. After a while, when she had bitten enough, she climbed down and snuggled into his arms. "Tang Yu, do you really let me do whatever I want?" she asked in a mischievous voice. His eyes were half closed, and his Adam's apple kept moving. He was a little excited. "Later, be gentler." He pulled her into his arms and pressed her face down. But it only took him 2 seconds before he lifted her head up with a muffled groan. This little guy actually bit him. Pei Chi-Chi laughed in his arms and nibbled on his neck. She said like a baby, "I'm already very light." However, he didn't ask her to bite him. Instead, Tang Yu looked at her and actually got up. He took off his bathrobe and walked to the bathroom. He was slender and well-built, and from his back, his muscles were slightly twisted. The little drunk cat was tempted, and immediately followed after him. In the bathroom, Tang Yu stood under the warm water and looked at the puppy that followed him. He ignored her and continued to take a shower. He was obviously angry. Pei Chi-Chi was half sober. She knew that she must have startled him. When a man was doing that, he was startled, and she licked her lips and came over shamelessly to hug him. "I'm sorry." Tang Yu lowered his head and looked at the fiery little thing in his arms. He snorted softly. "What did you do wrong, oh?" Chapter 997. Tang Yu's dark eyes were locked onto her for a long time. Suddenly, he rolled up her pajamas and pulled them upwards, as though he was tying her down. She was pushed against the wall in a somewhat rough manner, one of her long legs locked in place to prevent her from moving. Pei Chi-Chi was a little uneasy as she looked at him with teary eyes and meowed like a kitten. "Tang Yu." He narrowed his eyes and looked at her cruelly, his voice hoarse and hoarse. "Pei Chi-Chi, you were the one who said that I could do whatever I wanted." In his eyes, there was a hint of a mature man who was about to do something naughty, filled with lust. Her body was a little warm from being drenched in hot water earlier on, but it was a little cold at this moment. Just like that, she was trembling lightly, a most alluring sight. He lowered his head and kissed her, murmuring, "Chi-Chi, I'll dote on you well tonight." It was really painful. Pei Chi-Chi was about to cry. His various methods were simply infuriating. In the past, Pei Chi-Chi only felt that he was getting more and more shameless. However, when it came to sex, he was still very restrained and would not force her to go along with him when it came to things that were out of bounds. But tonight, he was especially indulgent. Late at night, Pei Chi-Chi was lying on his chest, her little hands pinching and pinching. At this moment, she felt a little regretful. If only Tang Yu had a xiong fur like old Can, then she would have something to do after this. Tang Yu grabbed her little hands, feeling a little exhausted as well. He closed his eyes. "Be good and sleep." She turned around in his embrace and only snorted after a while. Pei Huan asked when we're going to get married again, saying that you've slept with me for nothing. Tang Yu opened his eyes and looked at her before chuckling. "Pei Chi-Chi, what do you think?" She was a little angry as she pinched him again. It's the same whether we have a marriage certificate or not. He chuckled and whispered into her ear, is our Chi-Chi regretting marrying him? No way, no way. Pei Chi-Chi snorted, not falling for his trick. Tang Yu hugged her and confessed in the middle of the night, Chi-Chi, in this lifetime, I will only sleep with a girl named Pei Chi-Chi. Lowering his head again, he searched for her little mouth and kissed it carefully. His voice was a little hoarse as he said, Pei Chi-Chi, do you feel especially honored? Did you take advantage of me? Pei Chi-Chi's sleepiness was defeated by his shamelessness. She looked at him speechlessly. Tang Yu, can you be more shameless? Yes, I want my face because my little Chi-Chi likes it. He hugged her as if he was hugging a baby and coaxed her, be good and go to sleep. In his arms, Pei Chi-Chi says in a muffled voice, I'm not your little Chi-Chi. Your little Chi-Chi is that robot. Tang Yu said seriously, it has been locked in the study by you. Chi-Chi, I never knew that you could be so decisive with your rival in love. The more she listened, the more she couldn't bear it. Pei Chi-Chi decided to sleep. That night, she dreamed of Xiaoxin and Tang Yu. Early in the morning, she was kissed as soon as she woke up. When she opened her eyes, Tang Yu was already dressed. He leaned over and kissed her. His voice was a little hoarse, Chi-Chi, get up. She turned her head and looked around. It was as if everything had returned to the past. She blinked her eyes and pouted her little mouth, I'm so tired. He smiled and carried her to the bathroom. After that, he went downstairs first. After so many years, he still had the habit of flipping through the newspaper before breakfast. Pei Chi-Chi, who was wearing a chiffon dress, came downstairs and sat beside him. She leaned over to take a look and smiled. It looks like she's in high spirits. Chapter 998. Shun Lian had also cultivated the Golden Bell Shield, and her skin was impenetrable. Recently, she had been very active in social circles. Pei Chi-Chi was really afraid that she would accidentally become a social butterfly. Tang Yu folded the newspaper and glanced at her without saying anything. Pei Chi-Chi did not say anything either. After a while, she would sneak glances at him. Tang Yu found it a little funny. When they arrived at the office, Pei Chi-Chi returned to her office. Little Wen came in. Boss Pei, this is the information about plot G55 that you asked for. She placed the documents on Pei Chi-Chi's desk and then looked at Pei Chi-Chi carefully. Little Wen had been with Boss Pei for a long time and never thought that Boss Pei was a kind person. Previously, she heard that Shun Lian was interested in this piece of land. Boss Pei took advantage of the situation and seemed to be targeting her. However, Little Wen did not dare to say these words. She only dared to let it rot in her stomach. Pei Chi-Chi looked very seriously. After about 10 minutes, she looked up at Little Wen. Did the auction committee send an invitation to Boyi? Little Wen shook her head. No. Then think of a way to get one, Pei Chi-Chi instructed indifferently. Little Wen nodded. All right, that's not difficult. This matter was just as she said. It was not difficult, and it was done quickly. It was done in less than 2 days. Of course, there was no wall in the world that did not have a crack. What's more, this wind was deliberately let out by Pei Chi-Chi. Shun Lian found out that Boyi was also going to compete the next day. She specially made a call to Pei Chi-Chi. Boss Pei, Boyi is such a big company. Why make things difficult for a small company? Aren't you afraid of losing your value by asking for tickets yourself? Shun Lian said through gritted teeth. On one hand, she was not happy. On the other hand, she really had to produce some results to shut those shareholders up. Everyone in Jean Taihe was already dissatisfied with her. If she didn't make some achievements now, they might betray her in the future. That would be a nightmare for her. Pei Chi held the phone and smiled faintly. Jean Taihe is not a small company. Moreover, if Mr. Shen likes the G55 so much, why can't other people like it? Is this CEO Shen's business philosophy in such a simple and crude way? When it came to arguing, Shen Lian had never been a match for Pei Chi. She could only play tough. Pei Chi, just you wait. I'm going to get this land. Pei Chi tried to provoke her. That's what I want to say to you. After saying that, she hung up the phone first. Anyway, whether Shen Lian was angry or not, it had nothing to do with her. Little Wen happened to be beside him. She laughed and said, Boss Pei is mighty. Then, he said with some indignation, this Shen Lian is too overbearing. Who does she think she is? The whole world has to make way for her. Pei Chi put down the phone and said faintly, my family has been better since I was young. I'm used to this. Little Wen thought so too. After a while, she looked at Pei Chi and pursed her lips. Boss Pei, do you think we can get the G55 plot? Pei Chi took a sip of coffee and glanced at Little Wen. If we could, do you think we would wait until now to make a move? Bo Yi used to be Xing Yuan. He was an elite. How could he miss such a big fish? Just thinking about it, Pei Chi understood a little. Although she asked Tang Yu and Tang Yu did not say it clearly, as far as she knew, this was proposed by Meng Qingqing. At that time, many of Jean Taihe's senior executives were against it, but Shen Lian insisted on it. She might as well give her a ride. Chapter 999. Pei Chi nodded and suddenly asked casually, when are you going to have a child with Dink? Don't tell me you're really going to be a Dink. Xiaowen complained. He said that he would play for 2 years first. Really, he works every day and doesn't go anywhere to have fun. Pei Chi sighed in her heart. Poor Xiaowen, Dink said to have fun, and he was playing with you. On Jean Taihe's side, Shen Lian threw her phone down angrily and her face darkened. Who does Pei Chi think she is? She's so arrogant just because she has Tang Yu behind her. She looked at Meng Qingqing. Think of a way. I don't want to see Pei Chi at the auction. Meng Qingqing said lightly, President Shen, you're too impatient now. I'm too angry. Shen Lian walked back and forth as if she had gone crazy. She must be targeting me. She knows that I want that piece of land, so she stopped me. Pei Chi is so sinister, why does Tang Yu still treat her like a treasure? Her tone and eyes were full of indignation. Meng Qingqing looked down and there was a coldness in his eyes that Shen Lian didn't notice. After a long time, he said softly, what you need to do now is to calm down. Shen Lian waved her hand and the documents on the table fell. She said hoarsely, Meng Qingqing, how can I calm down? What she didn't want to admit was that if Pei Chi were to make a move, Jean Taihe would not be able to defeat Bo Yi. Meng Qingqing smiled faintly. There's no way to calm down. You have to calm down. Too many things have happened recently because you were too impatient, which made Jean Taihe lose a lot of opportunities. Moreover, you don't have to target Pei Chi for everything. It's not worth it. However, how could Shen Lian listen to Meng Qingqing's advice? Right now, her heart was filled with the desire to ruthlessly throw that slut Pei Chi-Chi's face to the ground and ruthlessly trample on it. She wanted to repay the humiliation she had suffered 100-fold. Meng Qingqing looked at her expression and didn't say anything else. When he walked out of Shen Lian's office, the corners of his mouth curled up, and his eyes were a little deep. Shen Lian had always thought that the people he hated the most were Pei Chi and Tang Yu, so he turned to her. But how could that be? He hated Tang Yu, but the one who caused Tang Xian's death was Shen Lian. He would not let her have it easy. He wanted to see her fall bit by bit from the high place and smash into pieces. Meng Qingqing's entire body was filled with coldness, as if to say, "Do not touch me." He was a special existence in Jin Taihe. He was parachuted here from the top management of Xingyuan. The middle and top management of Jin Taihe were polite and guarded against him, but they did not dare to do anything to him. There was even a rumor among the staff that he was Shen Lian's secret guest, and that he specialized in taking care of CEO Shen's physiological needs. Because of this, Meng Qingqing never explained. There was no need for him to. Not long after he left, Shen Lian dialed a number and said coldly, "Watch Meng Qingqing's every move for me." Yes, she had never truly trusted him. Meng Qingqing used to be Tang Yu's loyal dog, but this dog was too capable, so she had to be careful. If she found out that Meng Qingqing had any ulterior motives, she would make him suffer a fate worse than death. Another thing that made Shen Lian suspicious was that she had seduced Meng Qingqing 2 or 3 times, but he was not moved at all. She did not feel at ease using such a man. Meng Qingqing sat in the car and used his hand to pull the rear-view mirror. After looking for a while, he smiled coldly and started the car. Chapter 1000. On the day of the G55 auction, 3 pieces of land were auctioned, and the other 2 were the king of the land. Most of the real estate agents came for the 2 king of the land. The G55 seemed to be neglected. This was exactly what Shen Lian wanted to see. If there were too many people competing for it, it would be very disadvantageous for her. Shen Lian was in a good mood today. It was rare for her to dress up with a bun on her head. Her clothes were not so formal. Meng Qingqing came along with her and sat in the first row of seats. It was 9:00. She looked at the 2 empty seats on the side and smiled coldly. Pei Qiqi might not be able to come. She played with her delicate fingernails and blew on them. In fact, it was nothing. She just returned all the things that Tang Yu gave to her in the past to Pei Qiqi. Shen Lian's face was full of complacency. Sometimes, you didn't need to care about anything. You just needed to achieve your goal. Meng Qingqing looked at them coldly and knew what was going on. Shen Lian's wishful thinking was probably going to fail. Did she think that the current Pei Qiqi was still the previous Pei Qiqi? However, the previous Pei Qiqi could not deal with Shen Lian. But now, it was really not easy for Pei Qiqi to buy Jin Taihe. Just when Shen Lian was complacent and Meng Qingqing was thinking about it, a sound of footsteps came in front of them. Shen Lian looked up and was a little shocked. Pei Qiqi was in front, followed by Xiaowen and 2 bodyguards. Shen Lian's face was distorted because of anger. She stared at Pei Qiqi. How could she stand here unscathed? It was impossible. It was absolutely impossible. Pei Qiqi was holding something in her hand. When she passed by Shen Lian, she threw the thing in her hand into Shen Lian's arms. Shen Lian instinctively caught it, and then her face turned pale. It was the brake pad of the car. It's a gift for CEO Shen. CEO Shen has put in so much effort. It's good to have something to remember. Pei Qiqi smiled politely. Then, she sat on the side. Xiaowen gave Shen Lian a middle finger. Shen Lian was furious. Pei Qiqi and Xiaowen sat down and didn't look over. Seeing that the auction hadn't started yet, Shen Lian walked out to make a phone call. Her voice was a little low, but there was anger in it. What's going on? You can't even handle such a small matter properly. The person on the other side was in a dilemma. We've been discovered by that woman. Let's retreat. President Shen, this is as much as we can earn. Let's settle the bill. You didn't succeed, and you still have the cheek to ask for money. Shen Lian's voice was a little exasperated. The person on the other side wasn't anxious. He smiled coldly. Just based on this recording of our conversation, I think it's worth 1 million. CEO Shen runs such a big company. Don't tell me you're not willing to give this little bit of money to our brothers who worked hard for you. My 2 brothers were beaten up by that woman's bodyguard. They're still lying in the hospital now. Let's not talk too much. This matter of 5 million will be settled. Otherwise, Black Tiger, won't be easy to deal with. After that, the person didn't wait for Shen Lian to say anything and directly hung up the phone. This woman was really black-hearted. She wanted to kill someone, but she had to take full responsibility. Was a human life worthless? Fuck her. If I don't get the chance, I'll kill her. Shen Lian trembled with anger. This bastard, how dare he play recording with me? Chapter 1001. When she returned to the auction venue, the auction had already started. The first piece of land was the king of the land. The starting price was 100,000 yuan per square meter. It would be impossible to get it without a few billion yuan. Shen Lian did not consider it. Her eyes were on G55. Land G55 was cheap, but it covered a lot of land. She wanted to build a new city here. The king of the land was finally sold for 115,000 yuan. It was bought by a senior real estate developer. Land G55 was placed last. The starting price was very low at 15,000 yuan. Because it was near the sea, it covered a lot of land. The total price was not low. It was comparable to the king of the land. Shen Lian raised her paddle first. 16,000 yuan. She looked at Pei Chichi provocatively as she said that. Pei Chichi only smiled slightly. Xiao Wen, who was at the side, came over and said softly, a typical foolish person with a lot of money. Pei Chichi looked at Little Wen. You can't be so mean. Boss Shen has suffered a loss. You have to comfort her later. Little Wen stuck out her tongue. Boss Pei is so soft-hearted. What a joke. There were still people fighting for this piece of land. Before Pei Chichi made a move, there were already people challenging Shen Lian to raise the price to 18,000 yuan. After that, the increment was very slow, and each person was increasing by 1,000 yuan. When it reached 19,000 yuan, that person was defeated. Shen Lian was actually a little anxious. There was a thin layer of sweat on her back. 19,000 yuan was beyond her expectations. Pei Chichi sent her on her way again. She raised her paddle. 20,000 yuan. The host laughed so hard that he could not close his legs. Shen Lian could not laugh anymore. She gritted her teeth. Pei Chichi, don't you think it's not worth it to spend 20,000 yuan? Pei Chichi looked like a fool with a lot of money. She laughed softly. Boss Shen, if you think it's not worth it, you can choose not to bid. Choose not to bid. How could Shen Lian take this lying down? However, when she thought of the faces of Jean Taihe's shareholders, she endured it and wanted to give up. Just as she was wavering, Pei Chichi picked up a phone call. Her little face was smiling, and her voice was very soft. Yes, I'm about to get it. 20,000. It should be Tang Yu on the other side. Shen Lian felt as if she had been fried in a pan of oil. Her whole body was on fire. She sneered, 21,000. Pei Chichi put away her cell phone. She didn't make any calls, but Shen Lian took it seriously. The way she looked at Shen Lian seemed to be a little surprised. She paused for a moment, then raised her paddle again. 22,000, 23,000. Shen Lian gritted her teeth. Pei Chichi seemed to hesitate for a moment. She lowered her head in disgust with Xiao Wen for a while. Then, she raised her paddle again. 24,000, Shen Lian was about to go crazy. She glared at Pei Chi as if she wanted to eat her up. The highest bidder wins. President Shen, don't tell me you don't even have this little bit of elegance. Pei Chi deliberately provoked her. Shen Lian clenched her teeth. Of course not. She raised her paddle again. 25,000, as she said that, she glared at Pei Chi, looking as if she was going to fight to the end. Pei Chi only smiled faintly. Congratulations, President Shen. Shen Lian won, but it sounded a little awkward coming from Pei Chi's mouth. She was still in a daze when the host shouted excitedly, Congratulations, President Shen. He was sweating in his heart. This piece of land had been auctioned off for a sky-high price. He even ran down to take a photo with President Shen. The next day's newspaper headlines showed how forced Shen Lian's smile was. Chapter 1002. During the celebration dinner, Pei Chi even had a drink with Shen Lian. CEO Shen, you have a good eye. I have to learn from you in the future. Just now, Shen Lian gave a long speech about the blueprint of the G55 land plot. It sounded beautiful, but the reality could be very harsh. Pei Chi left first, leaving Shen Lian alone. Of course, Meng Qingqing kept her company. Shen Lian raised her wine glass and looked at the direction where Pei Chi left. She glanced at Meng Qingqing. The way you looked at her just now, it seemed like you were looking for Tang Xian's shadow. Shen Lian was constantly reminding Meng Qingqing, cutting his heart. His heart, which was riddled with scars, had already been frozen. He looked at her coldly. Don't forget, you are also Tang Xian's elder sister. Shen Lian was unhappy. She snorted. What elder sister am I? They are sisters born from the same mother. Meng Qingqing only smiled and said nothing. Shen Lian drank a little, but she insisted on driving. She liked the thrill of speed when driving. The speed at which she was about to die made her feel calm. Today, she was happy. She was very happy. She had finally won against Pei Chi. Meng Qingqing walked to his car. He opened the door and was about to get in. Suddenly, he looked up at her. The shareholders may be unhappy with CEO Shen. Be prepared. When the results of the new city are out, they will shut up. Shen Lian sneered. She opened the door and got into the car. The car drove away quickly. Just when the car was on the main road, a white Shimei in front of her crashed into the side of her car. In the panic, Shen Lian saw Pei Chi's face. She zoomed in and zoomed in. Her car banged against the railing and wouldn't start again. The Himalayan screeched to a stop in front of her. Pei Chi looked at Shen Lian and said, CEO Shen, I'm sorry. I hit your car. Shen Lian's face darkened. She had bumped into him on purpose, and now she was apologizing. Pei Chi turned around and instructed Xiao Wen, call the police. Xiao Wen immediately called the traffic police. Shen Lian screamed, Pei Chi, you're crazy. They were both drunk, and they would be detained for drunk driving. Even if they were deliberately targeting her, Pei Chi didn't have to put herself in trouble, right? Not long after, the police sirens could be heard. Two young and handsome police officers jumped out of the police car and looked at the two of them. They were both very good-looking. One was a Porsche, and the other was a Shimei. However, it turned out that little Shimei was very resistant to collisions. The Porsche had a big dent, but it was completely fine. What happened? The traffic police officer took out a pen and paper to record it. Shen Lian snorted. She hit me on purpose. It's just a simple traffic accident. Pei Chi smiled. CEO Shin, you're not making a big joke just because you're drunk, right? Or do you have paranoia? Shin Lian gritted her teeth. We can check the surveillance cameras. But she looked around for a long time and couldn't find any surveillance cameras here. This was a blind spot. There were no pedestrians or surveillance cameras. Her heart sank. Pei Chi had done it on purpose. She felt like she had been tricked. The traffic police didn't care about what was going on between the two girls. They only cared about the spilled alcohol. If they had drunk alcohol, it would be a different matter. If they were drunk driving, they would be severely punished. Chapter 1003. Pei Chi was quite cooperative. She was fine in the end, which proved that she did not drink. Shen Lian could not believe it. Pei Chi had obviously drunk alcohol. Why was she fine after the test? It's your turn. The traffic policeman was impartial. Shen Lian refused and looked arrogant. However, the traffic policeman did not fall for it at all. He sneered. Miss, we can sue you for obstructing official business. Shen Lian pursed her lips but still took the test in the end. The alcohol was over the limit. Call the insurance company to deal with it. Also, Miss Shen, you have to go back with us. Faced with Shen Lian's request to stay for 3 days. At the scene, Little One looked at Pei Chi and smiled. She must not have thought that Boss Pei would not drink alcohol with her but drinks. Pei Chi looked in the direction of the police car with an indifferent expression. She has always been cold and arrogant. She did not think that she would fall for my petty tricks. Teach her a lesson so that she will not harm others in the future. Little One nodded. Yes, she is too evil. Pei Chi looked away. Someone will take her. Little One felt that her master's words were too domineering. Of course, Shen Lian would not be detained for 3 days. However, she was squatted in the police station for a night and screamed in fear of the rats inside. The first person she called was Meng Qingqing, but Meng Qingqing's phone was switched off. Later, she instinctively called Zhang Hengyuan. He picked up and said, I'm in Canada. Shen Lian blurted out, come back. Zhang Hengyuan was stunned for a moment. Shen Lian held the phone. At that moment, she hoped that he would come back. At that moment, a girl's voice came from the other side. Hengyuan, who called? The voice was sweet and especially intimate when she called his name. It showed that they were close. Shen Lian felt like she had been slapped hard in the face. She hurriedly hung up the phone. Zhang Hengyuan held the phone in his hand and smiled bitterly. He turned to look at his cousin. Naughty. However, he did not reprimand her. Everyone in the family knew about his relationship with Shen Lian, but no one approved of it, or rather, they all hated Shen Lian. He could understand why his little cousin was doing this. Smiling, he said, don't do this in the future. On the other side, Shen Lian was holding her phone with a blank expression. Zhang Hengyuan has a girlfriend. It was quite normal. He wasn't young anymore. If he went overseas, there wouldn't be the vicious Shen Lian there. Pretty good. He must hate her to the core. Just like how she hated Pei Chi. Whenever she thought of Pei Chi, Shen Lian's heart would reignite the flames of anger. Her intuition told her that she had been fooled by Pei Chi. Shen Lian's assistant was very careful, for fear of angering this young lady. After getting into the car, Shen Lian took a whiff of the smell on her body. It was a little unbearable. How's the company? Did those antiques have any reaction? Her assistant hesitated for a moment. It's quite a big reaction. Let's wait for CEO Shin to go back and deal with it. Shen Lian flipped her hair. I'm not going to the company today. She was already in a bad mood. Why would she want to provoke those old fogies? The assistant did not dare to talk about this sensitive topic anymore. She said in a low voice, the garage called. They said that it will take a month for the car to be painted. Shen Lian was annoyed at the thought of the car. She waved her hand and said, take the car out and scrap it. The assistant swallowed hard and did not say anything. Chapter 1004. Shen Lian saw their expressions as if they had seen a ghost in broad daylight, and she was even more furious. Get out, all of you. Get out. The assistant hurriedly chased them away. Don't be angry, Mr. Shen. Don't be angry. Shen Lian turned around and said softly with a cold face, you get out too. The assistant failed to flatter her, and tears welled up in her eyes for a long time. I'll get out. Finally, the huge hall was empty, and there were no longer those annoying gazes. Shen Lian sat there for a long time and murmured, this place belongs to me completely. I can do whatever I want, but why am I still unhappy? She looked here and thought of the past. When Shen Zhongshan and Mrs. Shin were both here, they had celebrated her 20th birthday. That day, Tang Yu had also come. That day, there had been laughter everywhere, and she had still been a little princess. Now, she had become the owner of this place, but she had lost her happiness. Shen Lian went upstairs and soaked in the bathtub. The warm water couldn't soothe the loneliness in her heart. No one remembered that today was her birthday. She lifted her leg and looked at the stump. Who would like a woman without a foot? Who would love her? Her phone was beside her. She lay on her back and flipped through the phone book page by page, and finally stopped at Zhang Hengyuan's page. She stared at it for a long time, and finally dialed it. Shen Lian had a nasty look on her face. It was a night in Canada, and he might be rolling in the sheets with his girlfriend. She was calling to make him uncomfortable. She thought that he wouldn't pick up, but unexpectedly, he picked up. His voice was hoarse from his sleep. What's the matter? Why did you pick up my call? Shen Lian admitted that she was a little provocative. Zhang Hengyuan was silent for a while, and then he asked calmly, you called and didn't want me to pick up. That's harassment. Shen Lian's voice was a little sharp. Have I risen to the level of harassment in your heart? Is it because you have a new girlfriend? Zhang Hengyuan didn't explain and just listened to her. Zhang Hengyuan, have you forgotten how you looked like a beast when you were lying on top of me? Do you want me to help you reflect on it? Shen Lian's voice sounded strange. She had deliberately wanted to break him up with his girlfriend. Naturally, she felt that it was better for everyone to be unhappy. Now, that woman must have heard it. Shen Lian smiled happily. She was very pleased. Then she said softly, a little pitifully, Hengyuan, today is my birthday. So, do you want me to say happy birthday to you? Zhang Hengyuan said indifferently, actually, you can say it directly. It's a little inconvenient now. He hung up. Shen Lian was in a daze. She had ruined them, but he didn't seem to care too much. He didn't care anymore. He didn't care anymore. After an hour, Shen Lian received a parcel. It was a 12-inch cake with a little princess on it. It was pink and beautiful. That day, Shen Lian sat at home and cried at the cake for an hour. She knew that it was from Zhang Hengyuan. She called him frantically, but he kept turning off his phone. She kept calling, and finally, his phone got through. A girl told her very coldly to stop harassing her boyfriend and to let bygones be bygones. Chapter 1005. The cell phone slipped from Shen Lian's hand, and she laughed softly. She didn't love Zhang Hengyuan, but she still clung to the warmth he gave her. She deserved it. In the end, he still didn't care about her. Finally, he had another woman by his side. Shen Lian laughed softly until tears rolled down her cheeks. From now on, no one would love her anymore. Those she loved and those who loved her in the past didn't love her anymore. Her tears kept falling as she ate the cake bite by bite until her stomach was about to burst and she vomited. In the CEO's office of Boyi Company, Pei Chi sat at her desk reading documents. She was very busy from morning till night. Actually, Tang Yu had helped her with half of the work, but she still felt that she didn't have enough energy for the other half. She looked up at Tang Yu, who was making coffee, and complained, "Tang Yu, why do you only spend 2 hours reading all the documents every day? The rest of the time was spent making coffee, drinking wine, and waiting for her to get off work." She had already started to seriously doubt her life. This kind of life where she had a noble wife and a lowly husband was definitely not what she wanted. Tang Yu brewed a cup of coffee for her and placed it on her desk. He said kindly, "Chi-Chi, this is very refreshing." He leaned against her desk, noble and elegant, looking good and detestable at the same time. Pei Chi stared at the beautiful bone china cup. "I don't want it to refresh me." Tang Yu's slender fingers gently touched the cup, and there was a faint smile in his eyes. "If you find work boring, you might as well take care of your private affairs." Private affairs. Pei Chi couldn't help but take a sip from the cup and look at him eagerly. Tang Yu smiled again. "Mr. Tang hasn't had sex for a week." His tone was very natural, and he didn't lower his tone. This was the office. And there was Xiao Ran, second secretary, and third secretary on the other side of the wall. Pei Chi glared at him. "I'm serious." Tang Yu smiled. Pei Chi ignored his unreasonable request. She drank her coffee and continued to look at the documents. She slowly said, "Then we'll continue to wait." She suddenly looked up and smiled at him. "President Tang, I suddenly found a way to make you feel as bad as I do." His fingertips were still caressing the cup, gently and slowly, just like how he usually rubbed her lips. After a while, Pei Chi blushed and quickly lowered her head to hide it. Tang Yu smiled and put down the cup. Then, he got up and returned to his office. After he left, Pei Chi looked at the cup that he had been stroking for a long time and couldn't help but pick it up. There was still half a cup of coffee inside, and the temperature was just right. She took 2 small sips, and the door opened again. Tang Yu looked serious as he said, "Boss Pei, is this an indirect kiss with a male subordinate, or are you hinting at something?" She looked at him, and he smiled and closed the door. Xiao Ran had followed him here to visit. Now that his master had left, Xiao Ran naturally followed. Recently, Tang Yu and Xiao Ran had been very free, and they were a little bored. Little Wen was busy, and Ding Ku and Tang Yu were the same. They were bitter men who didn't have sex. After the master and servant left, Little One immediately came in and handed over a top-secret document. "This is the latest situation of plot G55. Pei Chi flipped through the pages and pages of photos attached to it. She smiled. Shen Lian is really impatient. She even came up with a name. Chapter 1006. If Little Wen had brought this over just now, she would have shown it to Tang Yu. Shen Lian had not given up yet. Little Wen looked at Pei Chi-Chi's expression and thought that she was a little jealous. She coughed softly. "Should we throw out our evidence now? Shen Lian will probably have a headache. Let her be proud for a few days." Pei Chi-Chi smiled. "I'll watch her tear it down with her own hands once her yuzu is built." What's more, such a new city would have to empty Jean Taihe. All they had to do now was wait. Little one looked at Pei Chi in a daze. She felt that Boss Pei was very black-bellied. After a long while, she came back to her senses and nodded before leaving. Pei Chi looked at the photos and casually put them into the drawer. The newspapers also reported about Shen Lian's intention to name the new city Yuzhou. Some well-known bloggers specially opened a column to scold Shen Lian for being a white lotus. Previously, she wanted to make Tang Yu happy to be a father. Now, she was playing affectionate. Who was she playing for? As for Shen Lian, Pei Chi only gave her the word essence. However, Essence was very happy. Various activities would mention the origin of Yuzhou. Often, when she talked about it, her eyes would be filled with tears and she would look like she missed it infinitely. Pei Chi sat on the bed, reading the news on her cell phone. She had just finished reading an exciting report about Shen Lian and her Yuzhou when Tang Yu walked out with a bath towel around him. He sat on the bed and wiped his wet hair. He glanced at Pei Chi. "What are you looking at?" Pei Chi put down her cell phone, hugged the blanket, and smiled. Shen Lian flirted in front of the reporters again. "You. Mr. Tang, what do you think?" Tang Yu dropped the towel in his hand and reached out to pinch her little face. "What kind of feelings can you have?" She looked at him suspiciously. He moved up and leaned against her. "Pei Chi, why don't you demonstrate what I'm thinking?" Go find your little seven." Pei Chi kicked him, but before she could take it back, her foot was caught by him. Tang Yu flipped her over and pressed her down. Her little feet felt very small in his large palm. Warm fingertips gently caressed the back of her foot. Although the action was not too excessive, it revealed a sense of secrecy. Pei Chi bit her lip and kicked him with her other leg. Tang Yu just smiled, treating her like a child. He was so slow that she could not take it anymore. She closed her eyes and bit her lip. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Tang Yu, you're a pervert." She did not know why he liked her little feet so much. Every once in a while, he would do it shamelessly. "Since Boss Pei has said so, I would feel sorry for him if I don't be a pervert." He went even further and pulled her little feet to do embarrassing things. Pei Chi bit her lip and struggled a little. She knew him. He liked her obedience, but struggling occasionally made him even more excited. Looking at his happy expression, she said in a sweet voice, "Tang Yu, do you feel comfortable doing this? Or did he really just have a perverted hobby?" Pei Chi pursed her lips. Her little feet were quite hot, but he still did not care. When she finally calmed down, Tang Yu hugged her and helped her clean her feet, carefully wiping them off. She hugged his neck with her little hands and said in a voice as soft as cotton candy, "Why do you like this so much?" Chapter 1007. Tang Yu threw the tissue away and smiled. "Let's have an appetizer." As he said that, he held her upright and lowered his head to kiss her. She could feel his eagerness. Pei Chi bit his beautiful lips and snorted softly. "Beast!" Tang Yu smiled, reached out to hug her, and pressed her down. The bed was messy and she was kissed until her blood was boiling. All she could hear was his murmur beside her ear. "Chi, I'm going to get serious." Early in the morning, Pei Chi was brushing her teeth in the bathroom. The moment she looked up, she saw a patch of red on her collar. It was all the hickeys left by Tang Yu. Coincidentally, he came in as well. Pei Chi looked at him in the mirror and said angrily, "Look at you. How am I going to face others?" Tang Yu squeezed the toothpaste slowly beside her. It was rare for him to wake up later than her. It was obvious that he had overexerted himself last night. He lowered his eyes and smiled. "Boss Pei, you don't have to go to work today. My subordinates won't see us. But we have to go to Old Master's later. It's his birthday today. Have you forgotten? She pinched him forcefully with her little hands, feeling that he was doing it on purpose. Tang Yu smiled indulgently and let her pinch him as much as she wanted. Pei Chi snorted softly and continued to brush her teeth. When it came to evening gowns, she was even more frustrated. That was because she could not wear any low-cut gowns or even off-the-shoulder gowns unless she was willing to let others see how intense she and Tang Yu were last night. Pei Chi stood in front of a row of gowns. She glared at Tang Yu with resentment in her eyes. I can't find a suitable one at all. She seriously suspected that he did it on purpose last night. He purposely did it on her so that she would be wrapped up tightly today. His dark thoughts were as clear as day. Tang Yu sat on the armrest of the sofa and looked at her angry look. He smiled and said, "Let me have a look." The slender and young man looked good in anything. He walked over and put his arm around her waist, smiling faintly. "Chi-Chi, do you think these revealing dresses will look good?" Pei Chi-Chi's little hand hung around his neck, and her voice was sweet as she said, "You like to wear more. In that case, when I sleep at night, I'll also wrap myself up tightly." He said, "Chi-Chi, are you sure you want to do that?" He turned around, lowered his head to look at her and chuckled. "Chi-Chi, it's actually quite interesting to be a little more violent." Pei Chi-Chi's eyes were wide open and round. It was quite cute. Could he be any more shameless? Tang Yu smiled and reached out to pinch her little face. "It was purely an accident, Mrs. Tang. I definitely didn't do it on purpose." He picked out a neckline gown for her. It was made of fine and delicate metal, which made her little neck look beautiful. The fabric was soft and fitting, and it was light purple. It was quite beautiful. Her hair was put up casually by Tang Yu, and there was a pair of teardrop-shaped diamond earrings on her ears. The overall style looked quite good. Pei Chi looked at Tang Yu and looked at him suspiciously. "Do you often pick out clothes for girls?" "Very rarely." He pressed her thin shoulders and smiled. "Mrs. Tang, you're even cuter when you're jealous." She looked at him. Her delicate look made him lower his head and kiss her for a while. Then he said hoarsely, "Let's go." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.